Hey guys, welcome back to Danger Planet. Today, Rich and I are going to do our first faction focus overview on the game Eldfall Chronicles. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm here with Richard the Richard, Mr. Butlerface. Say hello, Richard.
Hello.
And today we are going to be running through our first of 4 faction focus overviews for a game that Rich and I have really enjoyed playing, actually, Eldfall Chronicles. If you guys haven't checked it out already, Rich and I did a first impressions and a game system overview video about 2 weeks ago. And we've been continuing to play this game a lot, quite frankly. In fact, I would say, Rich, this is probably the game that we've been playing the most lately, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's definitely our currently most played game. So
Yeah, which is fun. I actually have been really pleasantly surprised with this game system. So today we're actually looking at the Coalition of Thenion, which is the one of 2 of the Rin, which are the native people to this world. They're one of the 2 factions of Rin that exist in this game. They're categorized physically as what a lot of people would traditionally think of as like a dark elf. They've got really pale skin. They worship a moon goddess, which is where they take their name from, which is roughly translated as the children of the moon. And they live in these very complex, very ornate underground societies and like kingdoms. I like to think of it as like if goblins actually did a really good job maintaining their underground burrows, right? Like they're like underground, but they have like these really nice constructed kingdoms. They're not like living in squalor or anything. And they
you have described dwarves.
No, I mean, okay, fine, but these guys are certainly not dwarves.
No,
They're not as like they've got more of like their architecture is more like spindly, right? And they've got more of that elven vibe to a lot of their city, at least in my mind, when I look at the art and stuff. Where dwarves would be like squat and like square and shit like that, you know? At least
That's
in my
true.
brain.
Plus the pointy ears.
Plus the pointy ears.
Dead
Yeah.
giveaway.
Yeah. And they're attuned with magic, so their faction can use magic, although they generally use magic to enhance their physique or their physical characteristics rather than relying on it as like a spell or anything. So that's a very, very high level overview of who these guys are and how their faction fits into the world. Rich and I are going to go through the 5 available models to the faction. Every faction has between 5 to 6 models. The reason why this faction only has 5 is because their expansion model, which is the Dragoon, can either be fielded as on foot variant or a mounted variant. So there's 2 models for that. Rich, do we want to start? Do you want to start with Nightshade, since that's the current existing HQ unit?
Yeah, let's start there.
Okay, so let's just go at a very high level, Rich. Why don't you give a generalized description of how Nightshade works, and then why don't you talk about, to you, the most substantial stuff that she does on the battlefield, and then I can chime in because I think you're probably the most qualified to lead things off here with this section.
Sure. So Nightshade is the leader unit, so it's really the only unit in this faction with stratagems. Nightshade is what I would consider the ultimate glass cannon. This model has an absolutely absurd amount of damage output that basically cannot be mitigated by any of the evasive abilities in the game thus far. It also has the highest offensive stat and the highest agility stat in the game currently, and it's fast with a speed 6. Now, to make up for that, it is, like I said, a glass cannon. It has 1 lonely hit point and 1 armor, so it can kill pretty much any model in the game with one activation worth.
Rich, do you want to go over just? I get 100% what you're saying. Do
Sure.
you want to give the folks on the internet a little bit of context as to why this particular model has access to I don't care about what you're doing attacks? Because I think you're talking about the crit strike thing, force them through, and
Sure.
basically, do you want to just give some quick context on how you can basically just like spam through death at an opponent on that side?
Sure. So Nightshade has all 4 levels of the assassination skill, which it gives you a lot of good options, but at its most powerful level 4, gives you decisive blow, which literally says that when you're in the active role, you can turn all of your successful attacks into critical hits. The biggest note of this is that critical hits cannot be dodged. They cannot be negated by any of the current magical effects. So essentially, you make all of your hits unavoidable and almost guaranteed to damage the model.
Yeah, because the traditional play sequence for a normal model that doesn't have everything I do as crits is, okay, I'm going to try to hit you, and if a person wants to keep their model alive and they have a reaction point left, they'll go, cool, dodge, which then means the person has to hit them on crit hits to actually hit them if they're successful, whereas Nightshade is like, no, literally everything I roll is a crit, you will die now.
Yeah, not only does it kind of turn off dodge as a reasonable reaction to a melee attack from it, but also if you try to attack it back, critical hits also automatically win a confrontation roll, so unless you also roll a crit, you're not going to be able to cancel any of its hits either. So
yeah, which is gross. And then she has one of my favorite things is her blink movement ability, which is just really cool. Basically, she can move through anything. It doesn't matter what it is, she can just blink through it, which is awesome. And you can do that for your dodge movements as well as your normal movements as well as your runs, which is cool.
Yes. Yeah, I will note that you actually can't use it on a dodge, because now that I'm reading it, it says when you declare a movement, and a dodge is not a movement.
But the movement happens at the end of the dodge action, right? There's a 3
Oh, yeah,
movement.
no, yeah, you're right. It still counts. Yeah, you're still good. Yeah.
Gotcha.
You got me.
The thing that I really like there is you react with a dodge, and then you corner up right against a wall, and then you react with a dodge. Tox trying to eat one of her stuffed squirrels. I apologize, the internet. One moment.
We'll edit that in post.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually think we will. I think it's fine. She can eat a squirrel on the internet. I don't think anyone will be mad about that.
Upset the squirrel people.
So my point is that you put her like right up against a wall, right? And then you have a dodge reaction, and it's definitely going to be a gotcha if you can like phase her through a wall towards a thing, like I should have done when we played the other day. That's a spicy move.
Well, and also one of her stratagems gives her and I believe it's her and all assassins and rogues, which is her entire faction, gives them hit and retreat, which means that after they make an attack, they get to then make a move. So she can set up a situation where she can come in, attack you, and then move through a building or a wall so that you can't slap her back on your turn, which is good, because if you catch her without her agility is very high, so she can dodge pretty well. But if you catch her without any AP to react, she will just die.
And it also a really big other thing that it lets her do is it lets her re-stealth. If you can do that hit and run type action, it lets you re-stealth naturally if you can get her out of line of sight of any of the opponent's models, which is a huge deal for her, both from a staying alive standpoint, because you can't really be targeted unless you're perceived, and also from a DPS standpoint, because it lets you proc surprise attack every time you drop Shroud successfully. So.
Yes, and that's a good point, because as you mentioned, one of her other big strengths is the ability to Shroud. So because she has stealth, the highest level of stealth, she gets to start the game in a shrouded state, which essentially just means that it's just a token on the board. You don't necessarily know which model it is. If your opponent has multiple shrouded models, you just know it's one of those models until it does something to unshroud itself, like an action, or you take an action to perceive it, and then you get to see what it is.
And the two other very notable things here is, one, you cannot target a model that is in the shrouded state unless you're perceiving it, right? And the other thing is, when the shrouded state drops, you automatically amend surprise attack to your attacks. So it gives you a huge burst of damage. And surprise attack is significant because it halves all of your opponent's relevant stats for that turn. So it allows you to really, really get in there with burst damage and then like kind of run away, which is what this young lady. I don't know. I don't actually know her age. She might be hundreds of years old. To be fair.
That's true. She's got elf ears. We can't be certain.
Yeah.
And then of course, let's not forget the fact that she has infiltration, the highest level of infiltration, which means that she can literally deploy anywhere.
Oh my god!
As long as she's not in your enemy.
It's so good. Oh, so you don't know the joys of playing Eldfall until you get to go second with Nightshade as your leader. So you know exactly where your opponent's stuff is, and then you're like, where do I want to put this model? Anywhere on the map shrouded. It's great. It's a lot of fun. So that's Nightshade. I think that's a pretty good overview of Nightshade. She's got a lot of really good movement abilities. She's got tons of burst damage DPS. She is currently the only model in the game with level 4 assassination, in that she can do anything she does as a crit in her active phase, which is absolutely banana-ramas, at least to me. I mean you agree that particular.
I think it's relevant to note that that's an option. You can still just choose to get an additional strike, which brings you up to a strike 4 attack, by the way,
or +6 strength,
or +6 power. Yeah, so
pretty good.
Those are if the crits don't matter, if you're attacking a model that has no AP left, so they're not going to dodge anyway, and they don't have exceptionally high armor, sometimes just rolling more die is better. So that option is always there as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about my favorite model to play. I love this guy, the Rangers Guild Hunter. So basically, I guess the lore on this guy is that he's a member of the guild, and that he is about as rangery a ranger that has ever rangered. But I love playing with this guy on the field, particularly because he's got a really huge threat range. He has a really high powered attack because he also has assassin, so he can add +6 power to all his bows. And he also crits on 1s, 2s, and 3s. So he, to me, he's kind of this really good, really mobile turret-based unit. And when I say turret-based unit, what I mean is he can sit in a spot and just fling out shots at very high damage, at very high range, at pretty decent accuracy for most of the game, unless an opponent answers him, because he's got a range 20 up to range 26 bow, I think.
It's up to range. It's up to 40 inches. So
okay, so yeah, so
if you're playing on a standard sized board, his range is the board.
Yeah, you could hit the board basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And also he has the ability to enter stealth. He's got really maneuverable abilities where he can, because he has leap, and he also ignores. Doesn't he ignore forest and difficult?
He doesn't have leap. He has climbing, which is still fine. He does ignore difficult terrain, and also ignores forests, which is
really good because he can move through the map really fast, which is great.
Yeah, I love this model. This is my second favorite ranged model in the game, but I think this model is a really good example of like you said, a good turret. He has the ability to deploy anywhere on your table half, which is still a lot of space. And you can deploy him on top of terrain, so you can get the height advantage. He has +6 power to all his attacks because of assassination, which essentially just kind of cancels out most armor in the game, which means that even on heavily armored models, you're generally wounding on a 10. So your 50-50 is always good. And yeah, his range is amazing. He also moves. He also natty moves at the end of his activation sequence because he has. I think that's Ranger, right? That lets him do that. Yeah, the Ranger lets him make a move. It's actually in the end step, which is better, I would say.
It's in the end step of his active turn.
Of the player's turn. Yes.
Of the player's turn.
Yes. Yeah. He gets to do a move, and obviously it can't be reacted to. And he has speed 6, so he is one of the faster models in the game. And 14 accuracy. So
so you can set him up so that he will he'll run behind cover, he'll move out of cover, take shots, and then move back behind cover without using AP if you want. I should have done that other on Monday against you, but I didn't, and then you destroyed him with a gargoyle. Just got ongled by gargoyle claws.
Yeah,
right.
well, again, the one hit point, which is a running theme for this entire faction, but
Well,
one hit point with armor 2 means that if you hit him, he's probably gonna die. So,
but we're about to talk about the tank of the faction, which
Ugh.
means that he's actually just kind of not paper and a normal, reasonable model.
He's slightly below average.
You know him. He's your friend and mine. Who am I talking about, Richard? What is this model called?
This is the Thenion Swashbuckler, which is a
It
fancy
is
word
indeed.
for a pirate.
Yeah, he's a pirate elf. So
Yeah.
I guess in the lore, he's like a mercenary company. They're supposed to be young, hungry elven adventurers.
Yep.
And that's what he's doing. I played with this guy a couple of times. He's not bad. I don't like him as much as I like some of the other models, but that may just be a portion of the game still having kind of a limited model pool because it's very, very new, right? And he's a neutral faction character, which means that he can be hired into other factions as well. And he's got a couple of interesting things going on for him. He's got the fencing ability, so he can get into melee with another character and then debuff them from an attack perspective if he wants. And he also has rerolls on attacks because he's dual wielding, and he has the dash ability, which is pretty good. That's kind of my initial thoughts. What are your initial thoughts here, Richard? Have you thought about bringing this guy into any of the other like Sand Kingdom lists or anything you're playing like that? And also, how do you think he functions kind of within faction?
So I actually really like this guy. I know you weren't hip on him when we first played, although to be fair, when the first time you played, we were using the uneroded card, which gave him even less armor, although I don't think that was relevant. I think that this guy's good at what he does. I think that he's a very cheap model, and I think that the primary reason why you want this guy is because he tar pits. That's what this dude does. You want him to just run into if there's a high priority target or something that you think is going to actually be able to kill your other more important, more expensive models, you run this guy in there, you get maybe one good hit, and then you just sit there because he's a warrior, which is relevant because you just go into a defensive stance, which means that when you get attacked on your opponent's turn, he's rolling extra dice, which makes it harder to win the confrontation roll, right?
Yeah, it lets you turn him into tar pit mode, which then he says, okay, in a traditional normal reaction, if you're being attacked, right, you only roll one die, and you have to throw that die at your defense. As a warrior, you get to throw the amount of die
your normal amount,
that you normally would throw, it makes it much harder from a clash perspective to actually hit this guy. And then on top of that, he's got his fencing ability, which is an active debuff to the opponent's attack. So he's meant to, Rich is 100% right. He's meant to like run in there, tie up a model, maybe take a hit because he has 2 HP instead of 1.
Does have two.
And then I guess you are right. I mean, when I was playing with him, he was armor 1 and they buffed him to armor 3. They were like, that was just a misprint, our bad guys. Yeah. So I wrote in like red Sharpie 3 over the 1, so I'll never forget it. I don't know. Any other thoughts on some spiciness that you think is doable with this fine gentleman?
I don't see a situation at the moment where I would ever take this guy out of faction. I think that he serves a purpose in faction because he does something that they otherwise just don't have access to. And I think that fencing is a very good defensive ability because if you're especially as a warrior, because if you're throwing 2 dice on their turn and then you can also reduce their strike by 1, so now it kind of really turning the tables on them. So he's annoying and he's cheap. 16 points is cheap. So you can throw an upgrade on him maybe. But I don't think I would take him in any other factions, at least not at the moment. So,
I mean, I think that's fair. Honestly. So, all right. Then what do you want to do next? You want to do the Night Temple or you want to do Mr. Dragoon?
No, we got to do the Night Temple. It's a step on me, mommy, please.
I mean, we're not going to ignore the mommy. That would be rude.
It would
first
be rude.
of all. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, this model's just awesome for so many reasons. It's great. Both the sculpt, the rules, everything. I'm about it. She has a lot going on as a model. She is currently the only player character in the game that has access to fly natively. The Sand Kingdom can give models fly with a magic carpet and give people spicy magic carpet rides. But She is the only one that can actually just fly natively as a model. She's a little weird because she's got a bunch of enchantment based spells, which limit her a little bit in terms of the flexibility. Like she can't react with them, for example, and a bunch of them are closer range. But she's also got Charm level 2 on her, which is a really, really good defensive ability. I kind of think of as Charm in this game as if in Malifaux as Terrifying, like a good Terrifying stat.
Yeah.
Which is like Terrifying in Malifaux, when you look at it, it's like, oh, that's not that bad. And then you play against like a Terrifying 12 model and you have like willpower 5 models and you're trying to hit it and you're like, wow, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think Charm is actually a very strong ability, especially with Charm 2, because if they fail that roll, they also got to move towards you, which generally people don't want to be moving towards the lady with the giant spear.
Yeah, and she has a spear in melee, which is really good because it makes her threat range 2 instead of 1 or 0. A lot of models in this game have a threat range of 0. It's not like Malifaux where 0 is like uncommonly bad and used as a debuff to certain actions to level them, in my opinion. Sometimes, like, there's a lot of models that have a threat range of 0. Some have a threat range of 1. Few have a threat range of 2. You can buy a spear, which I've even seen you do a couple of times, just to make your threat range bigger. Just because you're like, cool, I'm gonna fucking give this Sand Kingdom Lantern guy a spear because like I gots to, you know. Anyway, the other notable thing here is she has a attack, or rather is it a spell or an attack? The life leech, is that a spell?
No, it's just an attack. She just has a weapon that just has the effect. So this is the only instance of this effect in the game, but essentially a spellbound effect just means that weapon always has the effect of that spell on hit. So if she hits you with her quote unquote embrace, she just gets to heal herself when she damages you.
Giving Night Temple mommy hugs.
Yeah.
Come here, Richard. Give me a hug. I would give her a hug.
I mean, sure, why not? I mean, I think that this is a very good model.
Oh yeah, I admittedly before I got a bunch of reps in, now that I've got like 3 or 4 reps in with I'm just gonna call them the Dark Elves because I love Dark Elves, term of endearment here. Now that I've gotten 3 or 4 games in with these boys, I feel more comfortable playing her. But she just had so much going on from a rules perspective that when we were making our initial lists and it was always like 3 ofs.
She has a lot of text. She has a lot of text.
Yeah. As my old Pro Tour testing buddy would say, my old Pro Tour Magic card testing buddy would say, there's a lot of text on that card. There's a lot of text on that card.
I think
it does a lot of things.
She does a lot of things. I think generally she's more of a support piece. Her attack is decent but not great. Her spells are actually really strong buff spells that are generally going to be putting on your other more damaging models.
And it's important to keep in mind, guys, that a lot of her spells are not sorceries, so you can't use them. You can't use them in response as a reaction. She's really only going to be able to do these spells actively during her activation with her AP, and you have to balance that with the fact that she's an incredibly mobile model that can basically move 20 inches a turn wherever you want her.
Yes, in addition to that, she is actually the fastest model in the game at the moment.
Yeah.
The combination of flight and leap, which at first I thought was redundant, but it actually isn't, because sometimes you don't want to fly and you just want to leap.
Yep. And I think she's a perfect candidate for a first aid kit because you don't want that model to go down and get fucked. Okay. Anything else on the Night Priestess mommy, or are we moving on to Dragoon Face?
One thing to note, which I overlooked originally, is that she also buffs the morale of everything around her, which is actually super relevant because the morale of these models is actually below average. So that is also a nice little buff that she gives out.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I mean, I think a feature of this faction, a design feature in my opinion, is that they don't have amazing morale, and they're designed to be like the Dark Eldar play style, where you're sneaking around, like burst damaging down a unit, then running away. You're not supposed to like have a straight up fight. Like these guys would never fight the Helion League in a straight up walk towards you, like let's both just walk across the map and roll dice at each other attack, because they would get blown away.
Yeah, you'd lose that one.
Yeah, like real hard.
Yeah.
Real hard. Which I think is awesome. I think that the ability to design that into a game system that only has 6 or 7 pieces on the board at a time, like each player is only playing with 3 to 4 pieces, and still maintain these strong design identities, is really part of what's drawn me to this game, quite frankly. Because you and I can play 3 games of Eldfall, 3 distinctly different games of Eldfall against one another on a single Monday night at the LGS. Whereas, I love Malifaux. I'm never giving that game up. But that game takes like 2.5 hours if you want to play fully. Usually more like 3.
Yeah.
So, all right. Enough on that. We're on to Dragoon Face.
Yes, the Slayer Dragoon and her loyal Lupus Rex.
Lupus Shrex. Now, they have been doing, as of time of recording, they've been doing a bunch of changes to the mounted rules. So those are in flux a little bit. They've edited the card a little bit. But Richard, why don't we get a high-level overview of what Mr. Slayer, or Mrs. I think it's Mrs.
It's a
It's
miss.
Mrs. It's definitely a Mrs.
I've seen some pictures of the model. This thing's thick.
Slayer mommy, let's
Yeah.
go.
Anyway, so Slayer Dragoon is a very, very cool model. It is a neutral, which is interesting. And I could see taking this one in some other lists.
Yeah,
But
this model kicks ass.
its big thing is that it uses the new mount rule. It's currently the only model with that, which basically means that you hire the Dragoon, which is 17 points, and then you can choose optionally to hire the mount. I'm not convinced that there's any scenario where you wouldn't want to, but who knows at the moment, for an extra 5 points, and then by paying that 5 points at the beginning of the game, you have the privilege of throughout the game, whenever you so choose, that you can mount the thing, and then basically you replace the smaller model with the big mounted model, and it gives you a bunch of boosts, and one small one you lose a little armor in exchange for gaining a bunch of other stuff. And this model is very, very fast, and it has a very big, very scary lance that basically can only ever hit once, but oh boy, does it hit.
So here's the interesting thing, and here's the thing that we really need to talk about, right? It says that, so the lance can only attack once right now on its stat, right?
Yeah.
But it removes the restriction of only ever being able to hit once it's on its mount. So if you cross-hire this into like the Bushido Samurai faction, and you use things to give buffs to attacks, I'm pretty sure that you can attack more than once if mounted as a character in a faction receiving buffs.
Theoretically, but at the moment there's no buffs like that can affect non-warriors.
Why won't you let me live my best theoretical Dragoon life, Richard?
If the Dragoon was a warrior, then you could do that. But if the Dragoon was a warrior, that might be busted. So, but I mean,
why must you stop me from living my best life, Richard?
This thing has a 17 offensive stat. That means that it's hitting on almost every dice roll.
Yeah.
It has it's toughness +3.
And the only way to fuck up a clash with it is to roll a 19 or an 18, 19, or 20, I guess.
Oh, no, because you would miss, because your stat's not that high.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's how you.
Yeah, and I mean, it also has assassination, just the weakest version of assassination, which is still +6, which means that it's wounding. If it hits you, which it's gonna hit you because it has a 17 offense, it's wounding you on a 19, 16, no, 18. It's over a 20, which means that it's actually impossible to not wound you without some type of armor taken into consideration, which is hilarious. So on a crit, it actually cannot not wound because the crit ignores armor. So if you're ignoring armor, it can't not wound you. It doesn't even have to roll. Just take the wound.
it does 2 damage per hit, which is great.
Yeah, it does have cleave, which means it does 2 damage per hit, and knockback as well, which I guess is relevant if you somehow survive that.
Yeah, I mean, it smells great. I'm a big fan of it.
It's really
so why don't we talk about a couple of common starter lists, Rich, that you would suggest if you're just picking up Eldfall Chronicles And I've seen a lot of people, because the rules are available, guys, online for free. You actually have all of these stat cards freely available to you. And I've seen a lot of people simply just proxying bases. And then other people, Rich and I, we love this game so much that for the models that aren't available right now, we've gone out and 3D printed stuff. And we'll post some of that in our Discord if you guys want to see some of the models we're using. They're kind of fun. My Dragoon is a chicken rider, like riding a chocobo with a halberd. He's great. I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Rich, why don't you talk about a couple, maybe 1 to 2 or 3 sample lists that would be a good starting point for somebody that's just getting into Eldfall Chronicles and wants to start playing the Coalition, and what the strengths of the Coalition are as a faction. Like why if you're just getting into Eldfall as a player, why do you give a shit about this faction? What do they do? And what are a couple of lists?
Sure. I mean, lists are pretty straightforward. I mean, basically, if you're gonna play, you're gonna start with Nightshade, and you're gonna start with the Ranger Guild Hunter. There's no situation where you're not taking them both. And then realistically, you have that third kind of open slot that can, depending on the situation and the quest. I think that for a first game, I like taking the Swashbuckler just because it's a little bit more straightforward. The Knight Temple can swap in instead, and you lose some points, so you don't get as many like upgrades. But she is a very strong model. She's just for the first game, I might not take her just because there's a lot of text on that card, and you're gonna miss some of it.
And you're taking first aid kits a lot, I assume, right?
You can take a first aid kit. The problem is that at least with this crew is that because they're all essentially 1 hit point, first aid kits are actually not as great, because generally if something's hitting you, you're dead, because it's going to do a wound and then it's going to do another wound and then you're dead, and your first aid kit ain't bringing you back from the dead. So I think that first aid kits in general are usually better with 2 or 3 hit point models, but if you've got points for one, you can still take it. I would probably put it on the Swashbuckler just because he's the least likely to just get immediately deleted off the board. And you can use it if you can use it on yourself too if you're incapacitated, as long as you're not dead. So if you are going to take one, I would probably put it on him.
I mean, I've had plenty of scenarios where I used enough of my AP to dodge, and then like the last hit on the turn incapacitated me, and I was able to res. That happened even with the Dragoon when we were playing, because I put it on the Dragoon.
But the Dragoon has 3 hit points.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah. Well, not mounted, unmounted.
Well,
too,
unmounted. Yeah. I just think taking a in general taking a med kit on a 1 hit point model is I think that the likelihood that you're gonna waste it or not be able to use it that game is a little bit too high for the points. But
yeah, I think that's fair. That is fair. They are 3 points a pop, so they're kind of pricey.
I do really like they do have an upgrade, like a poison dart upgrade that lets you
it's like so good.
It's like a
one-time use AoE.
It's a one-time use, but it's an AoE, and I actually really like that on the Knight Temple Priestess, just because she's so fast and she doesn't really have any good attacks other than that, so at least not from a range. But
yeah, and she can just fly. She can just like fly into the general vicinity and just like nuke somebody. Like if there's a Sand Kingdom player and they've deployed super defensively, and their plan is to just like summon up a bunch of stuff. I think it's the Fangs of Tiamat. I think that's what it's called. I don't have the stuff in front of me, but
yes, I can look it up. I have it here, but yeah, I think that is correct.
But yeah, it's effectively a one-time use large template AoE where the character just like throws a handful of darts and it just schmongles people, and it's great.
So, yeah, Fangs of Tiamat, you are correct.
So any other high-level notes here on how the faction plays, the type of stuff that they're good at? Other than that, we'll get into the specific schemes here. But what any other notes on things the faction's good at, things they do well on the tabletop? Obviously, we've talked about their major weakness, which is they do not have a lot of armor, they do not have a lot of health points, but they do punch really hard, and they have a lot of mobility. And anything else?
No, I think that sums it up. Yeah, their main strength is their mobility, their stealth. I think that they excel in situations where, if you have to spread out, they do not need to be near each other. They don't really care what the other ones are doing. So they're really good at strats like that. They're really good at like focusing down one really important model, probably your opponent's leader, and just taking that out. And then most of the time, once you've lost your leader, it becomes significantly more difficult to win. So and yeah, their weaknesses are pretty straightforward. They are very squishy. If you catch them off guard, or if you trick them into using their AP in a less than efficient manner, you can do some serious damage. I think that actually their biggest weak point is if you have if you have a lot of models with taunt, taunt kind of wrecks them. So
yeah. Taunt is just a very good ability, to be fair. Taunt's just good.
It is. Yeah.
That's just that in my mind, that's up there with like Smite. Maybe not quite as good as Smite, but like,
oh yeah,
like up there. All right, so let's talk about they've got 6 specific schemes or secondary objectives that they can take, which are unique to their faction. So as a high level overview, guys, every faction in the game, so the 4 primary factions currently, each one of them has 6 unique secondaries that they can take, and those are the cards that you're drawing that are secret. I would say that they're similar to secondaries and schemes or in Malifaux, where you have them and then you reveal them on a reveal condition, basically. And they're worth the difference here is that schemes can be worth a variable amount of points on the card and also based on how much you complete them or whatever. But I would say generally they're worth somewhere between 1 to 4 points a piece. Rich, would you say is fair?
Yeah, most of them. So a lot of them max out at 3 points. Some of the more difficult to score ones can go up to 4. I think technically you can max out at 6 points on some of them, although that's really difficult and that pretty much requires you to table your opponent, but it is possible.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna run through each one of these really quickly. I'm just gonna say their name and kind of rules as written on the card, and then we can just talk about each one really quickly and
Sure.
then wrap this bad boy up. How does that sound to you, Mr. Richard?
Well, let's do it.
All right. So unmatched flanking says reveal this scheme during your strategic phase and discard it during the end phase. Receive 1 victory point for every attack against an enemy model that has no line of sight to your model before the resolution step of the activation in this turn. Max of 3 victory points. So do we want to just talk about this really? I think actually probably makes more sense to just
go through
talk
one
about
at a
each
time.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually think this is their weakest. I think this is the hardest one to score the max points on. It's basically you need to hit a model that can't see you. So you can technically do that without being shrouded if you're just behind them. But I think the general intention of this is that you're popping out of shroud because of the way it's worded. If you're in front of a model and you're shrouded and you start the activation shrouded and then you pop out and attack them, you're going to trigger the point for this. But I think because it has to all be done in one turn because of the way it's worded. I think this is actually really difficult to score max points on.
Yeah, and it's just difficult to line up. I've found trying to do this that it's difficult to line up scoring this and also line up not dying.
Yeah,
and also line up doing whatever the primary objective is. It's just hard. It takes such a concerted effort to do this particular thing, and the nature of Eldfall is such that you only have access to like 3 models at a time, and usually because this is a fairly hard thing to do, the most capable person of doing this is my girl Nightshade, and she's a pretty valuable model.
You can do it pretty trivially with the archer, right? But you're only going to really get 1 point off of it if you're doing that.
Yeah, but the way that I like to use the archer is as a turret for proactive prevention. I'm not trying to run around out of line of sight with him, flank with him. I want him in a stationed position, shooting his bow at people for the majority of the game.
Yeah, but if you're shrouded and you shoot someone, you still score it. So you can do it like turn 1 or 1 point. Because it just says if attacking an enemy model that had no line of sight.
No, because you drop
resolution.
No, yeah, because you drop shrouded. You drop shrouded when you attack. That doesn't work. You can't just stand in front of someone who's shrouded and shoot them and get this. It doesn't work that way. because you drop it.
Oh, yeah.
You drop the condition.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'd have to run. You'd have to run. You'd have to run out of their line of sight.
You have to be behind them.
Yeah, that's why you have to use Nightshade. So like, I'm not gonna do that with Nightshade. Maybe I will. Sometimes I do that with Nightshade. Actually. I mean, sometimes that is the specific plan.
It's probably fine as like maybe like a last turn you reveal it, and it you know, if you at that point Nightshade is, if she's still alive, she's either gonna die or you're gonna win anyway.
Well, so. What about a position where, think about it this way: I know I'm playing you and you're on Sand Kingdom, and I know that we're in a scenario where you're gonna try to hang out and summon gargoyles for value and just like have them do stuff, and then I just whip Nightshade across the board as quickly as I can, and I flip her backwards, and I just try to take out like 2 models, one of which is your leader, so it's like kind of matches what I'm trying to do anyway. I think that's when unmatched flanking would be good. Yeah,
that's fair. I still don't think you'll get 3 points on it though.
I don't think so either.
I think 1 point is. I think 1 point is trivial. I think 2 points is hard, and I think 3 points is almost impossible.
Agreed. All right, cool. I think we're kind of where we're at on this one then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the next one is leave unnoticed. Receive 1 victory point to a maximum of 3 victory points for every party member outside enemy model's line of sight at end of game.
See, this is easy, and I love it because you know what? You know how what's a really good way to be outside of your enemy's model's line of sight is if they're all dead. They don't have line of sight to you if they're dead, Doug.
No, that's true. If everything's dead, they can't see me. I agree with you. I really like this one. You've got decent control and agency over it, and it synergizes with what the faction wants to do, which is get in there, do attacks, get the hell out of there, which is great because it means that you can wrap this into your primary gameplay plan for the faction and progressively score victory points. I am always a huge fan of scoring mechanics in games that you as the player have agency over, but they might have a little bit lower. I would take a lower ceiling and more agency than I would take a super high ceiling and way less agency or almost no agency. Almost every time in almost every game I play, and this one seems like a little bit lower ceiling, much higher degree of agency and control over scoring up to me.
Yeah. Solid. Love it. And even if you don't kill them all, you can just run away and hide and still score points.
You realize that you said love it just as I timed that perfectly.
Yeah.
Did you hear that burp?
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks. All right. On to the next one?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Cunning tenacity. Receive 2 victory points for every model that did not lose HP throughout the game.
See, now this is one that has a really high possibility, but I think ultimately that you're going to struggle to score more than 2 points if you score any points, because the way it's worded is that they have to not lose HP at any point. So even if you heal them, they still lost HP. So you're not going to score it for them. So, and I mean, everything has 1 hit point mostly anyway. So like, I mean, it's not bad because generally if you have more models alive, you're winning. And so this is just kind of like a win more card, I think, but.
I don't know, man. My Magic the Gathering days have taught me that win more is generally not where you want to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah. I feel similarly. I'm lukewarm on this one. The upside to this is something you just said, which is, dudes all have 1 HP anyway.
Yeah.
So they're either dead or alive.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're really like skating the line, and you get 2 guys that survive that are both 1 HP guys that didn't take a hit, that's 4 Veeps.
Yeah.
That's still doable, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's doable. It's just, like I said, I would take this over unmatched flankings, but I would probably not take it over leave unnoticed.
Well, unmatched flankings is like for specific matchups. It has to be specific matchups. You can't just take unmatched flankings. Nobody does that, Richard.
Well,
nobody just does that.
You usually don't have a choice, unfortunately. It's usually just what you draw. But yeah.
Well, we're gonna have a discussion in the back end of this episode about that. But
all right,
hold on to that for a second.
Okay.
All right, next one is breach their defenses. Receive 2 victory points for every party member in the enemy deployment zone at the end of the game.
I don't actually love this one because while this is fairly easy to score. Most of the quests, at least most of the quests that
happen in the middle of the map.
Yeah, most of the quests that are currently available are either like stuff's either going on in the middle of the map or on the center line or off to the side. So generally, if you're making a beeline for their deployment zone, first off, they're going to be over there, and you generally don't want to just run into them because you'll die. And secondly, if you're over there, you're probably far away from the rest of the stuff that's going to score you points. So
yeah,
I don't know.
This comes back to, I think, a discussion that we've just had. If you go back like 5 minutes or so,
Sure.
There's just not that many models that you have agency over from a board control standpoint, and taking one of those models to accomplish, like moving them away from the action or positioning them such that when the game ends, they'll be really far away from the action. It really hurts your efficiency in accomplishing the primary objectives and interacting with your opponent, and or stopping your opponent from interacting with the primary objectives themselves.
Now, that being said, if it's the last turn and I know that the game's going to end, I can get pretty much from anywhere on the board into the opponent's deployment with like with the succubus with a single run. And so
or with Nightshade, honestly. You can take a Nightshade activation and get across the entire board basically with her blip. So
the blip doesn't. It depends on where you are. The blip doesn't increase your distance; just to ignore stuff. The succubus
but you take
literally go 24 inches in a single run.
But what I'm saying is, like, let's say Nightshade is unengaged, right? And she needs to get 20 inches up the board. She can really easily, like run.
But that's two AP. That's not.
I'm not saying AP. I'm saying in an activation, she can get from anywhere on the board to where she needs to be to score.
Well, that's two. That would be 2 activations, Doug.
In her, like, using her turn.
Well,
like,
sure. Yeah.
You're being semantical, sir.
Well, because you don't have she has 2 turns, she has 2 AP. So
I'm saying using all of Nightshade's AP, she can get from anywhere on the board if she's unengaged to the opponent's deployment zone to score this.
Right, but the succubus can do it with 1 AP.
Yes, they're both very capable of scoring this.
So if you need to abandon whatever's happening and score this, it's fairly easy to do so, but it does require you to pretty much abandon whatever else you're doing at that time.
Yeah, I agree. All right, second to last one, Assassin Contract. Pretty simple. Receive 3 VP for killing an enemy leader, and then it says in parentheses, rendering it dead. So you can't incapacitate the enemy leader, you have to kill the enemy leader.
I think this is their best scheme, and I would always pick it if I draw it or if it's an option. I think that this is kind of what you want to be doing with Nightshade anyway. In almost every scenario, Nightshade's best value is to either yeet her at the opposing leader and kill them, and then die in glorious fashion, or wait for them to mess up in positioning and put them in a compromising position, and then swing around and go in. Because if you're gonna essentially trade, because let's be honest, once Nightshade's in there, she's gonna die. So you're essentially trying to trade that model. You want to take out your opponent's leader if possible. So it's rewarding you a lot of points for doing something that you kind of already want to do.
And it's modal, right? Like, you either did or didn't. It's not like, oh, I score 1 point on it. You're like,
it's all or nothing.
If you fluke the pig, you're getting the bacon on this one, 100%. So all right. So now we come to the last one, which is blood for blood. Reveal this scheme during your strategic phase and discard it during the end phase. Timing is relatively important here.
Mm-hmm.
Select one of your models that suffered a wound from an enemy model. Receive 3 victory points if you incapacitate, not render dead, just incapacitate the enemy model that wounded your selected model this turn. So basically, the TLDR of the way this one works, because it's a little wordy here, is you pick one of the models on your team that got wounded by an enemy model, and you get 3 victory points if you incapacitate, not kill that model. You don't have to kill it. You can just incapacitate it, basically.
I hate this scheme. I think that this is difficult for the worst reasons, and it's because you're telegraphing exactly what it is you want to do, and so your opponent knows, okay, well, you're gonna try and incapacitate this model, and all
And
I
they
have
can
to
use
do,
their reaction points
yeah,
to deny.
all I have to do is just make sure that doesn't happen, and you don't score 3 points because you only get one shot at it. You only because you get to discard during the end phase. So I don't like this. I don't.
Yeah, I don't like the timing. Rich is spot on here. I think Richard is carrying a good degree of wisdom into that statement. If you're giving, this is all about the agency conversation again, guys, right? I really like things where I, as the player, have a huge degree of agency over scoring my victory points. I really dislike being forced into scenarios where I, as the player, both lose agency and or give my opponent agency over my victory points. I hate having to be put in scenarios like that. And I think that's basically what you're saying as well, Rich, in your own words.
Yeah, there's too much that's out of your control because you can't even try to do it unless they wounded you. And if there's if you're playing the summoner, all of their summoners can't be incapacitated. All their summons can't be incapacitated. So now essentially half their crew is immune to this scheme. So yeah, it's just there's too much to do, and you have too little control over it. So for that reason, I do not like this scheme.
And for that reason, Richard is out.
No.
But for real, actually, this is not a very good one. Yeah, cool. So hopefully this makes sense, guys. Hopefully this was helpful. If you're just picking up Eldfall and you're looking for overviews of these 4 primary factions, this is going to be a really helpful series for you guys. Rich and I are going to be rolling out with the next 3 ones in relative short order, because we've been playing a lot of this game now, so we have some opinions. And then Rich and I think, are going to actually give a go at some battle reports once we finish these faction overviews. So keep an eye out for those guys. Check out our Discord. We've got an Eldfall section where Rich and I post all of our nonsense. Rich and I play every Monday at our LGS, so most Mondays have been Eldfall Mondays as of late. And if you guys have any questions or anything, let us know. Say goodbye to the good people of the internet, Richard.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
What are you doing?
All right. You ready?
Yes.
I was looking up the lyrics in a format that I could sing them to you in, but it was hard because there's a couple of iterations. You ready? We're no strangers to love, you know the rules, and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just wanna tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up.
What is
Never gonna
happening?
let you down.
I'm
I'm
very
gonna
confused.
run around and desert you.
All right.
Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. We've known each other for so long. Your heart's been aching, but you're too shy to say it. Inside, we both know what's been going on. We know the game and we're gonna play it. Yeah, see?
Okay.